Hello, this is Jeff Arrowood, founder of the Catholic Educational Apostolate from the Abbey. Welcome to this video where we're going to explore theology of the body and specifically the idea of sexual genius. So when God says it is not good for man to be alone, he really is saying the opposite of what he was saying when he called each day of creation good. Each day of creation was good because what God created on that day was complete. It's not good indicates that alone, Adam was not complete. He was not truly the image of God unless he was in a relationship with another like himself. With that in mind, we go back to the story of Adam and the animals with new eyes. First of all, God gave each animal to Adam to name. What's the significance of that? For the Hebrew people, a name was more than just a label. A name spoke to something's core identity. So for God to invite Adam to name the animals was really to invite him to participate in God's act of creating the animals. The image is almost like God and Adam sitting side by side, working together on creation. This shared activity shows the intimate relationship that Adam had with God. The scripture says, but not one of the animals was a suitable helpmate for Adam. So here Adam is participating in God's divine life, but he's not yet the perfect image and likeness of God. So his relationship with God is not yet complete. So God creates Eve for Adam, and Adam's response, this one at last is bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh, is really saying more than this one is like me. It's really saying Eve completes me. Together, Adam and Eve are able to be the image of God because they are able to enter into a relationship of life-giving love that mirrors the Holy Trinity. So God isn't fumbling around at all. He's drawing Adam deeper and deeper into relationship with him. First, allowing Adam to participate in the act of creation, and then bringing him into the full likeness of God. Another aside I want to mention, because it was mentioned in a live program that I gave on this subject, is that when I say that that Eve completes Adam, it doesn't make Eve into a vassal whose only purpose is to create Adam. Adam and Eve complete each other. Eve needs Adam just as much as Adam needs Eve to be in a relationship of love in order to be in the image and likeness of God. St. John Paul II draws our attention to this time when Adam is working with God but is incomplete without Eve. And he calls this time original solitude. And he points out that sacred scripture shows us this time to emphasize our incompleteness without love. So what I have for you here is a painting from the Sistine Chapel, which is painted by Michelangelo. And this part of that great mural on the ceiling is called The Creation of Adam. But as we can see, Adam is not only already formed in this painting, he's very much alive. This mural is not showing how Adam was created, but it is showing the state of Adam's existence from the very moment of his creation. God and Adam are reaching out to each other. This is not God giving Adam life, as some people believe. Scripture tells us that God breathed life into Adam. This is actually showing that from the very beginning, the moment of Adam's creation, God created Adam to be in a relationship with him. God didn't just create us and then just let us go. He didn't create us as some hobby. From the very beginning, we were created to be God's children, to live in covenant with him as members of his family. Something else catches people by surprise about this painting, and that's the fact that Eve is actually in it. Do you see where? She's right there under God's arm. What does that mean? There's a clue in the cloud that surrounds God. This cloud is in the shape of a body part. Michelangelo was fascinated by human anatomy, and he often used body parts in his paintings to depict meaning. What part of the body do you think that cloud around God represents? Some people say a brain, some people say a heart, some say a womb. And I think any of those answers really make sense. Either way, the painting is telling us that God had Eve in mind in his heart conceived for Adam from the very beginning. Well, God is creating Adam. Eve is part of God's plan already. Adam and Eve are meant to be together because only love completes the creation of humanity in God's image. Then God gives Eve to Adam as a gift. He is really giving the relationship of love to humanity as a gift. God then tells Adam and Eve to go forth and multiply, filling the earth. Now, again, if we take too shallow of a view of Scripture, it sounds like God is just saying, reproduce, ensure the growth of the human race. But there's more to it than that. Again, the whole message of creation, of the creation story, is relationship, love, covenant, family. So, how does God want the earth populated? God doesn't want the earth filled with mere biological reproduction, or even by divine repetition, but through love, through family love. God is telling Adam and Eve, go and be in my image. Love each other and allow that love to create life. Love in a triune way, like the Father and the Son, generate the Holy Spirit by the love between them. Go and live in my image and create family love. And through family love, bring the world to my family and to my love. That's the magic of the mission that God gave Adam and Eve. All right, that's some deep stuff, but it is important for us to know and to recognize why we are created male and female. Now, this relationship of love that completes us as the image of God is most obvious in the sacrament of marriage, but it's also present in any relationship of love. But God created its true sign in the genius of man and woman, and in how these unique geniuses complement each other. So let's take a look at the masculine and the feminine genius and discover what defines our uniqueness as man and woman. St. John Paul II defines the feminine genius around motherhood. Now, of course, the main expression of motherhood is literal biological motherhood. But what he's referring to in the feminine genius is not limited to biological motherhood. The feminine genius is really the ability to draw people in and to nurture them and to help them become the best that they can be. This is really the impact that mothers have on their own children, but it's also the impact that every woman makes on the world. Wives do it for their husbands. Women do it for friends and family. This is the feminine genius. The male genius is likewise centered on fatherhood. Again, this genius finds its place in biological fatherhood, but it also transcends biological fatherhood. It enters into all relationships. The male genius is really our ability to go out and to seek good for others. As biological fathers, men create life outside of themselves, but they are driven to protect that life, to go out and seek good for it. Now, I'm a stay-at-home dad, and my wife is the bread earner for our family. And there's nothing wrong with that. That is not anti-biblical. In fact, in Proverbs, you see the woman of God who is working. She is buying and selling and working out of the home. But even though I'm the stay-at-home dad, psychologically, I still have a need to go out and to seek goodness for my family. And my wife, even though she is the one who goes out and earns a living through her job and brings the money into the home, she has the need to draw in and to nurture. She really has that strong need when she gets home to have her children come to her and sit on her lap and tell them about her day. That is her feminine genius. So now we have the vision of God's original plan for men and women to express their own geniuses, but to come together in a relationship to complete each other, and especially to complete the image of God in each other. But this plan got messed up. And one sign that it got messed up is that some people watching this video are going to be angry because I said that the feminine genius is rooted in motherhood. And feminism has convinced us that motherhood is a stereotype that is rooted in cultural oppression and is too rooted in biology. It limits the woman's identity to her biology. But we also need to understand the rest of the story. God's plan got messed up by original sin. Our masculine and feminine genius, our complementarity, and our ability to relate to each other have all been broken, not destroyed, but damaged. Think about the story of original sin from Genesis chapter 3. Adam and Eve eat of the fruit of knowledge of good and evil. By the way, not an apple. Okay, that's a pet peeve of mine. It was the fruit of knowledge of good and evil. And they eat of this fruit that Satan tells them will let them be like God, who knows good and evil. What does that mean? This is a bit of a tangent, but I think it's really important for us to understand. When God knows something, he doesn't know it passively like we do. He doesn't receive knowledge about anything. God is truth. So what God knows comes true. What God knows is true. God is also all good. He's the source of all good. He is goodness itself. So he is the standard of good and evil. He doesn't just make the standard. God is the standard. What is of God is good, and what leads us away from God is evil. Both of these truths about God tell us the same thing about the fruit of knowledge of good and evil. Satan promised that the fruit would let them be like God, who knows good and evil. Original sin really meant for Adam and Eve to make themselves the standard of good and evil, to write the moral law for themselves, based on themselves. So now, instead of anything that moved them toward God being good, goodness was defined for them as what benefited them. What was the first effect of eating this fruit? Well, theologically speaking, the first effect was that they broke the covenant. Like the prodigal son in Jesus' story, Adam and Eve chose to leave the Father and to claim the inheritance creation for themselves. But the first effect that Scripture actually shows us is that Adam and Eve realize that they are naked. Now, this does not mean that they didn't know that they were naked, that they were walking around without clothes on before they ate the fruit of knowledge. Something else is happening here. Scripture tells us that before original sin, they were naked but felt no shame. So we have to understand what that means first. Well, first of all, shame does not mean embarrassment. If they felt shame, it wouldn't have meant that they felt humiliated by their body. Rather, shame is an emotional need to protect ourselves against being used by someone when we feel that our dignity has been endangered by someone else's sinfulness. So before the fall, Adam and Eve were naked without shame because their relationship was based on love. They gazed on each other, not as things to be used, but as people to be loved. When Adam saw Eve, he didn't just see a body. He saw Eve in her fullness, her internal and her external beauty, her body and her spirit. And he loved Eve. So Eve didn't need to be ashamed. She didn't need to protect herself because there was no sin and selfishness in Adam's gaze. And the same when Eve looked on Adam. She did not just see a body. She saw Adam in his fullness, and she loved him. So he did not need to protect himself from her sinfulness either. But then Adam and Eve commit original sin. They make themselves the standard for goodness. And now they could see each other as something to be used. And they also realized that they needed to protect themselves from being used by each other. So their love for each other is now damaged. And therefore their ability to be God's likeness is also damaged. This is reinforced by the punishment that God gives to Eve after the fall. Now, I want to do a little tangent on these punishments too. The punishments are often misunderstood by people as being vindictive punishments, where God is saying, you broke my rules and ticked me off. Now I'm going to make you suffer. That's not what they are at all. Take a closer look. God simply allows Adam and Eve to experience the consequences of their sin. He tells Adam that creation, which is supposed to be God's covenantal sign of love, will now become an enemy, a natural consequence of the broken covenant. He tells Eve that she shall bring forth children in pain, which means that childbirth will now be painful, but it also means that she'll bring forth children into a world of suffering. Suffering comes from broken human nature, another consequence of original sin. God also tells Eve that her desire shall be for her husband, and he shall lord it over her, or he shall be her master. The desire is still there. The love is still there, but it isn't the center of their relationship. In its place, power takes the center stage. This is a consequence of making themselves, instead of God, the standard for good. So, because of original sin, the relationship between men and women has become a power struggle. And women usually end up being oppressed and used. The feminist movement rightfully called out how women have been abused and downtrodden. But unfortunately, it seeks to balance the scales by claiming more power for women. What really is needed is to change the entire paradigm of power into a paradigm of love. The masculine and feminine genius have both been damaged by this power struggle. Men and women both feel inferior, inadequate as men and women. The thirst for loving union is still there, but we experience obstacles of conflict and selfishness. Our sexuality is also damaged by a division between our body and our spirit that threatens to divide sex and the creation of family from love. And our freedom is wounded. The desires of our bodies, our selfishness, keep us from being able to choose the greatest possible good, which is what freedom is all about. Our sexuality and our relationships need healing. That healing comes from Jesus. Jesus came to redeem us from sin, and that means to return us to the covenant. To live in the covenant means to live in a relationship of love. Jesus heals the relationship between men and women by calling us to love one another. He does it even more explicitly in the sacrament of holy matrimony, where His grace allows us to love each other with His boundless love. And it's in the context of this grace-filled love that the feminine genius and the masculine genius can once again find their true form. But what does this look like in everyday life? Unfortunately, grace doesn't automatically heal all of the wounds of original sin. We still have to participate in grace and work toward full healing. Marriage is a school of love where a husband and a wife need to work tirelessly to love each other in the grace of the sacrament. But grace makes it possible. So, whereas the differences between men and women were a hindrance under the paradigm of power, through grace we can work on making those differences be complementary, so we build each other up. Let's look at a specific example. Let's explore the differences in the way that men and women communicate. Now, to understand how men and women communicate differently, we need to understand how men and women think differently. In their book, Men Are Like Waffles, Women Are Like Spaghetti, Bill and Pam Farrell offer a humorous and useful analogy to explain how men and women think. This analogy has been slightly altered by popular culture, including one of my favorites, Christian comedian and popular speaker Mark Gungor. But the idea is the same. Mark Gungor says, men think like boxes and women think like wires. Men have an individual box for every dimension of their lives. A box for work, a box for being a husband, a box for being a father, a box for sports, a box for hunting. And men can only be in one or two boxes at the same time. Not only that, but once we're in a box, we really hate to have to close it up and put it away and get another box out and open that one up. It's a lot of work. So if I'm watching TV, that's one box. I'm probably also working on my computer, probably during the commercials, but that's a second box that I have open. So I have two boxes open. While the show is on, I'm in that box, probably not even paying attention to my work. When the commercials are on, I switch over to my work box and don't pay attention to the commercials. Okay, two boxes open, in one at a time. That's pretty much the way men's brains work most of the time. But if I have two boxes open, I'm maxed out. So when my wife comes into the room and she wants to talk, I just can't open another box. If my wife starts talking at me while I'm in another box, notice I said talking at me, not with me, she's going to feel like I'm not listening to her. But that's just because I'm not. I'm absorbed in my open box. But being a good husband, I will reluctantly close my box, put it away, see it a little bit, take out my wife box, open that one up, and now I can give my attention to my wife. Now, a woman's thought process is much more like a mess of interconnected wires, or, according to the Pharaohs, a big plate of spaghetti, where everything is connected and everything is touching everything else. You can just see the conflict coming, can't you? My wife starts talking. Sweetheart, do you remember that we have a meeting tonight? Did you read that packet of papers we're supposed to read beforehand? And I'm thinking, okay, we're talking about the meeting. I'll get that box out now. Open it up. I have my wife box. I have the meeting box. And I'm looking in the meeting box and I'm thinking, okay, I have to remember to read that packet of papers before the meeting tonight. My wife continues, I wanted to talk to you about the babysitter. Who do you think we should ask to watch the kids tonight? Did you like the last babysitter we had, or did you like the one that we had last month instead? And I'm thinking, wait, babysitters aren't in the meeting box. Okay, wait, who did we hire last month again? Got to remember to read those papers for the meeting. And my wife continues, and if you're going to pick up the babysitter tonight, could you stop and get some gas in the van? And if you could pick up a gallon of milk too, that would be just wonderful. And I'm thinking, no, groceries? Where did that come from? That's not in the meeting box. It's not in the wife box. And it's not even in the babysitter box. Wait, who am I picking up? Did we decide on that, on which babysitter we're going to use? Or is she still waiting for me to respond to that? And my wife continues. Oh, and that reminds me. How much did you spend at the hardware store last week? Because I think we're over budget after our grocery trip on Monday. And I'm thinking, hardware store? Budget? Weren't we talking about the meeting? No, wait, weren't we talking about babysitters? By the time my wife leaves, I have about 10 boxes open in front of me. Remember, my limit is 2. And the contents of these boxes are all over the floor, and I'm trying to put them back together. And by the time I get my thoughts into some semblance of order, I'm plumb exhausted. I might even be too exhausted to get out my television box and my work box again. Now, men have a very special box that we use for just this sort of emergency. It's actually our favorite box, and it's a box that is completely foreign to most women because this box contains absolutely nothing. It's called the nothing box, and if we're given a chance, we'll pull this box out every single time. We'll open that box up, and we'll sit and we'll think about nothing. My wife will come into the room while I'm in my nothing box, and she'll ask me, what are you thinking about? And I'll say, nothing. Now, most women are biologically incapable of thinking about nothing. So they assume that the man is lying. No, really, what are you thinking about? Nothing. To which the woman responds, you never talk to me. So the difference in the way that God made men's brains and women's brains is a possible source of conflict. But it's also an opportunity for the husband and the wife to grow in selfless love and to build each other up with those differences. If we approach this problem from a paradigm of power, there's going to be conflict. But if we look at it from a paradigm of selfless love, What should be my response as a husband when I realize that we are communicating at these different levels? If I'm truly being selfless, my first thought is going to be, how can I communicate in her style? And my wife should be thinking the same thing. Now, Jody and I try to do this as much as possible. So if I'm absorbed in one of my boxes and Jody wants to talk with me, she'll give me a warning. Sweetheart, I see you're busy, but in 15 minutes or so, could you come and talk with me about our meeting tonight? That gives me time to tidy up my box, to finish my thoughts, to close it up and put it away, take out the meeting box, open that up, and look through it and refresh my mind on what is in the meeting box. So that's a great strategy for Jody to use with me to help me to switch boxes. Another strategy that we use is that whoever starts the conversation sets the rules of engagement. So if I start the conversation, Jody has to be ready to stay in the box. If Jody starts the conversation, I have to be ready to go on a journey. Also, if we're truly approaching this from a paradigm of love, we can open ourselves up to seeing how our differences are meant to complement each other. Why would God create our brains so differently? Well, if I'm honest with myself, I have to admit that I need Jody's interconnected brain. In my compartmentalized brain, there are a lot of things that I just wouldn't think of if I didn't have Jody to remind me. There are a lot of boxes in my brain that have a lot of dust on them because I just don't take them out very often. But Jody can remind me that they need some attention once in a while. Likewise, my wife needs me to sometimes calm her wandering thoughts. You know, she can get overwhelmed when she starts to think about everything that needs her attention. But I can invite her into my box and tell her, let's just focus on this one thing for now. So the differences that God created in us can be a source of conflict, but they can also complement each other and be a source of strength. And that's how God planned it. So my challenge to you is to reclaim your genius as a man or a woman. To do that, the first thing we need to do is to seek reconciliation and healing for those times when we've been made to feel inadequate, for those times that we have been victims of original sin. And we also need to seek conversion of heart for those things that keep us from loving selflessly and making God the center and the standard of goodness in our life. And once God is back in the center where he belongs, once he is once again our standard for good, then the second thing we need to do is to start relating to each other in love rather than in power. Next, we need to discover the strengths that we have that are rooted in our sexuality. Now, we each have individual strengths because we are all created with unique gifts and we are given unique spiritual gifts as well as natural gifts. But there are certain strengths that we have because we are man or because we are woman. And acknowledging those is an important part of reclaiming our genius. What is special about you because you are a woman or because you are a man? And finally, embrace your sexuality, your masculinity or your femininity, and embrace your identity as a son or a daughter of God. And thank God that he has made men and women different in ways that allow us to build each other up. And thank God for calling us to live in his image and likeness by living together in love.